You're listening to the 3 Feet Radio Show with Ben Carbonaro and Luke Herbert. From our studios come special guests and netball commentary, exclusively on YouTube.
G'day listeners and welcome to the 3 Feet Radio Show for the first time in 2017. Joining me in the studio today is my co-host Luke Herbert. G'day Luke.
G'day Ben, and while it's nice to have some beach sand around from the studio and a bit of dust, it's time we go back to work.
It is time to go back to work with my day job with the AFL. I'm back there and enjoying that. I've been back about almost a month now, really enjoying it. But I must say, Luke, it's a very exciting year ahead with the netball landscape in New Zealand and Australia changing significantly.
It is, you're right, and the change is exciting, purely as a netball fan, and I'm speaking purely in that sense. I'm going to miss seeing the Australian teams come and some of the Australian players I used to like seeing. But, I think in this case, though, if I put my heart aside, this has definitely changed for the better, Ben.
It probably depends on who you ask, Luke. I think it comes down to the fact that New Zealand and in particular Netball New Zealand were getting a little bit disappointed that they were funding the majority of the ANZ Championship through Sky. Then there were differences of opinion with Netball Australia, but at the same time too, that'll therefore mean that there'll be hopefully even more interest in the international games when the Diamonds play the Silver Ferns because they won't get to always see the same players all the time.
Well, that's true too. And just speaking of internationals, the Quad Series is just wrapped up, which the Australian Diamonds won. The Silver Ferns had a couple of comfortable wins over Wales at the tail end of that series. And, the score, was always going to be lopsided, but I do think the Silver Ferns need to play some of these other nations. It's a bit of a catch-22. If they don't play the Silver Ferns, they don't improve, yet when they do, they get hammered. But look, more of that, please. And Ben, what do you think about, do you have any thoughts on the announcement of the Silver Ferns side of the draw being announced today for the rest of the season, international season?
I did see that, and I must say too, sometimes I wonder what goes on in New Zealand. They might be a little bit more organised. No disrespect to my former employer in Netball Australia, but obviously with a lot more of non-sporting events happening here in Australia, it makes it a bit harder to confirm venues ASAP. But credit where it's due to Netball New Zealand. I saw that. And g'day to Kate Buchanan there at the Southern Steel too via Facebook, encouraging me to come over. And she says if I come over, she'll make me some cheese rolls. Well, thanks for that. But a busy time of the year heading into AFL finals. So unfortunately, I won't be able to make it. But hopefully at least one of those the Quad Series games or Quad Series matches will be played in Melbourne. And I'll be able to go along and have a look and hopefully get some copy, write a report and do a couple of interviews.
Well, I must say, just before we move on, Ben, I am madly excited about Invercargill hosting Quad Series games. Out of international netball, if we exclude the major tournaments, the World Cup and the Commonwealth Games, I think the Quad Series has ascended to a favourite of mine.
Why do you say a favourite of yours? Because you've got it's just 4 nations in international netball, or what is it that you like about it?
I think you've really nailed it there, Ben. Okay, maybe in an ideal world they would have added perhaps Jamaica or Malawi, but it's not an ideal world. Look, you get the 4 nations involved. The format's, discounting the last installment of it that had some logistical issues, the format's pretty good because all the nations play each other. The draw's good, in other words. You get a bit more variety. It's not just Australia and New Zealand playing each other endlessly, which perhaps there's too many Constellation Cup games each year. And I like seeing a variety of players from the different nations as well.
And it's also an opportunity for players from countries like South Africa, etc., to maybe put their name in lights for recruiters for the teams in Australia and New Zealand because they might not otherwise be seen.
Absolutely, and it's a chance for them to shine. And just speaking of recruitment, just going over to the new Suncorp League in Australia, Ben, give us a little bit of a preview of you think, who's the team to beat and what are some of the rivalries to watch out for?
Well, I think on paper, Collingwood are definitely the team to beat. They seem to have a bottomless pit of money when you look at who they've recruited. They've recruited the likes of Caitlin Thwaites, Ash Brazel. That's just 2 names. And if you look at the rest of the list, it's a star-packed side. It's almost an Australian Diamond side playing at club level or something like that. And with regards to rivalries, I'm particularly being Melbourne-based that I am looking forward to Melbourne Vixens versus Collingwood. But then, of course, in Queensland, you'll have the Queensland Firebirds taking on the Sunshine Coast Lightning. And then you also have in New South Wales, the New South Wales Swifts taking on the GWS Giants, which will be interesting too.
Yeah, and then the New Zealand competition, the ANZ Premiership, which we'll come back to a more of an overview in a moment, but I think in terms of rivalries, you have all the traditional provincial rivalries like Canterbury versus Otago Southland, which still represent both provinces. And you should have a new rivalry between the Northern Stars and the Northern Mystics develop over the years, and just because they're fairly local, a bit like having two Melbourne teams. And I would also hope that the rivalry develops such that netball fans, whether or not you are a supporter of either of those sides, will be looking forward to their matchups during the regular season.
Rivalries is always great, and rivalries in sport is always great. I'm particularly looking forward to the Vixens playing Collingwood this year. The crowd, I think, will be phenomenal. Hopefully the media interest will pick up a little bit too, which will be good. And just generally, just the wider netball community in Victoria. Finally, back to having two teams in Victoria, like the old Commonwealth Bank Trophy days when we used to have the Phoenix and Kestrels. And I must say, I went to quite a few of those derbies back in the day, and they may not always have been competitive games, but the atmosphere and just the crowd was always great.
Yeah, and in some ways, in a lot of ways, things have gone full circle. And Ben, just before we move on, is there anything else you'd like to add? We are going to deal with the broadcast deal and how people can view the Suncorp League in a moment, but is there anything else you'd like to add in terms of players or teams for that competition?
Nothing in particular, Luke. I think I'm going to reserve my judgment until I've seen a bit of the competition. Obviously, you've had a couple of pre-season practice match series between various sides, but I think you can't really take too much out of that. I think the coaching staff and the players of each side have been using that more to just get new combinations going and get used to the styles of play.
And just to mix things up a little bit, we'll cover the ANZ Premiership now. And I think, to be fair, I think it's a clean slate for all the franchises, except for the Northern Stars, who are brand new and didn't exist in the old ANZ Championship. And there isn't really a lot to go on in terms of how the different franchises will go. Past history doesn't really count for anything. In short, there's a number of reasons why I say that. We're not going to be playing the Australian sides. There's been quite a number of player and coaching changes. Probably the only really telling thing I've really read in the off-season is a comment from Sue Hawkins that appears in an article on the ANZ Premiership website. And she's quoted as saying, "From our point of view, I'm really happy with who we've got. We're going to create a good environment and success will come with whatever we see success as," she said. Basically, the Tactic are looking to become the netball nursery of New Zealand, what the Otago Rebels were once upon a time in the very old ancient historical National Bank Cup. Now, how they fare and the merits of this will be judged on how they go results-wise.
And you talk about the results-wise, Luke. I know you're a passionate Tactics fan back when you used to live in that particular area, but for a long time, and I don't like using this word as in an insulting way at all, they were the laughingstock of the ANZ competition. They could just never really get going, the Tactics. They'd be consistent for one half, and then they'd drop off, or they'd play a full game, and then you just never knew across the history of the ANZ Championship what they were going to do each year.
Well, and there's a very fair comment and criticism. I mean, you could have actually said a lot worse, and so could have I. And on the Netball Scoop forum in the past, I've dealt with the Tactic, and I've dealt with them on this show too. And I am going to give them a clean slate, because it wouldn't be fair to have a go at the Tactic now and not the other franchises that have underperformed in the old ANZ Championship. But I will just say this. I do hope the Tactic over the next couple of seasons become a side capable of at least challenging for the finals. I don't think it's in anybody's interests at top level New Zealand netball if the Tactics simply remain bottom feeders. But until we get an idea of how they fare, I think we better sort of switch gears a bit and come back to Channel 9 in Australia, Ben. And can you tell the listener a bit about the sort of coverage they'll be giving the Suncorp Super Netball League?
With regards to broadcast of the Suncorp Super Netball League here in Australia, Luke, Channel 9 will be broadcasting 2 games live a week, but not on their main channel as we know it. It'll be on their 9 Go channel, I understand, which I think is a little bit disappointing, because if you want maximum coverage, you don't want to put it on your secondary channel. You want to have it probably on your main channel, so you've got more eyeballs and more people watching it. Yeah, more people watching it and more people generally interested in it. Definitely got no issues with the commentary team that's been announced. The likes of Liz Ellis and Sue Gordy have already proven they're good at commentary. of netball from when they covered the ANZ Championship games in Australia. And all games will be able to be streamed live via the Netball Live app. It doesn't matter if they're on 9Go or not.
Well, I also hope that Kiwi viewers will be able to view the games, even if it's through online streaming. Certainly there shouldn't be any clashes with Sky unless they buy the rights to the coverage of the games. And speaking of Sky, I think the one big advantage that I'm only going to touch upon is the free-to-air coverage of the Suncorp Super Netball League. People won't have to fork out $80 a month to pay TV to see the games. And the broadcast deal, it's a starting point. Okay, it would be better if games were on the main Channel 9 channel, but look, it's just as easy to watch one of the other channels. And just as a sort of brief note, last season I watched AFL on Duke, and for the benefit of our Australian listeners, Duke is a free-to-air channel here in New Zealand. And because AFL is a niche audience, it wasn't on any of the regular TVNZ channels. Now, I am confident that netball in Australia will grow from the niche audience to the mainstream sporting audience, and that's when it will hit the regular Channel 9. And even if it doesn't, I would still stand by that statement, Ben.
And just case in point too, look, you have to look at the AFL women's competition that's only just started over here within the last week or so. They're not on secondary channels; they're on Fox Footy and on Channel 7. And I think it's great to see women's sport getting coverage like that. And hopefully, we might even see that happening with the new league within the next here in Australia within the next year or so, because they definitely have a good platform from what they built on for the ANZ Championship. Because as we know in Australia, it's a very different media market to what you guys have in New Zealand. There's a lot more codes of football that netball traditionally has had to compete with for column space. It's definitely not the case like that in New Zealand at all.
No, and we've covered that on the show before, and we've also covered the sort of merits of free-to-air coverage versus coverage on pay TV, Sky, and how Sky funds sports in New Zealand. And in that sense, some things are unchangeable. To some degree, the sporting landscape in Australia, while the sport of netball, the Suncorp League can grow, it will, always have to face the sort of February time slot to avoid competing with the NRL and AFL, just as one example. And like with pay TV funding New Zealand sports, likely that business model will continue in some form or another into the future. What business model that takes on is another matter entirely, but that is for another show or for people to comment on. But just out of interest, Ben, and just to throw you under the bus, what do you think of the concepts of Super Sunday in the ANZ Premiership?
Yeah, we were talking about that off air, Luke. I quite like that idea because it means that you get bang for your buck, so to speak. You get to see all the teams playing in one venue across one particular day, and it therefore means, because of the way the draw will be structured in New Zealand, that each team will play each other at least 3 times.
Yeah, I'm not sure if it's technically a full 3-round draw or not, but by the time you chuck in the 2 Super Sundays where all the teams play on the same day at a venue and the regular round draw, you certainly get the number of games Netball New Zealand wanted in the calendar space they had allocated. And I was just thinking about this, and the other possible advantage, probably by accident and not design, is when the Silver Ferns get 2 major tournaments like the World Cup and the Commonwealth Games, the tightness of the schedule, because there are double headers in the ANZ Premiership also, may help them be better prepared for the tight turnarounds at those tournaments. I mean, you'd have to think the experience can't do them any harm anyway, Ben.
Yeah, correct. And just touching on another point, I'm going to throw you under the bus, Luke. What's your take on the BICO League games being played before or after ANZ? I know the ANZ games, because I know that ANL games will be the same here. They'll be played before and after Suncorp games, and I think it's great for those athletes trying to get contracts, being able to play on the same court as the level above them get to.
I think it works well, and I've had a brief look at the draw for this coming season's BICO Netball League, and I think the South team's playing 1 game in Gore. I think because of Super Sunday, they probably can't always play or after the Steel play, but putting that aside, I think in general it's good on all counts. As you say, it exposes the players to those venues, if not the crowds. It sometimes works in with Sky TV, who will cover the games. The crowd, if they want to, people like myself will stay afterwards and watch the game. And it's, at least with the Steel last year, if you bought a ticket to the main game, you just stayed and you watched the BICO game afterwards. And it makes logistical sense too. They're not having to find alternate venues and transport options and so on. So all in all, I think it's a winner.
I think it's a winner too, because what we did have here in Australia was we had players that would sit on the bench in the ANZ Championship game beforehand, but then they'd be able to still get their netball fix and be able to still get their weekend game in because they would have played state league during the week by being able to play in the game after.
Yeah, and this is just my opinion, and this is both sort of in my heart and a rational opinion, which is a bit unusual for me. But I think in general, at the top level, netball in New Zealand, it's heading the right direction and has been now since the start of the Bico League. You know, we've got the ANZ Premiership coming. You know, the Bico League's up and running. There are perhaps some issues with umpiring, which we will touch on another program in relation to making sure we invest enough into umpiring in terms of what we pay them and training programs and stuff. But we're going to save that for another show because we've got all year to tackle this stuff. But that aside, and it is a pretty big issue admittedly to put to one side, you know, I think Kiwi netball fans, you know, you can feel good about the way things are going for the first time in a long time, Ben.
That's a very, very fair call, Luke. It'll be interesting to see what sort of responses we have on social media, because I remember when it was the ANZ Championship, even up until last year in the last season of the competition before it was dissolved, there was a lot of negativity from Kiwi netball fans. I mean, yeah, we got some negativity here in Australia as well. But one thing I did see, and I'm going to put my Aussie hat on here, was I saw a lot of negativity from Kiwi fans attacking Aussies about how they played the game and things like that, and also the inconsistencies with rule interpretations, which we can keep for another show another day.
Well, I'm just going to speak plainly here, and I'm going to speak beyond the netball realm. And to be quite frank, Kiwis are a nation of whiners. The number of doers in this country versus the number of complainers is well out of proportion. And if it was closer to even 50-50, we'd have a much better country. That's just my feeling.
That's just you being honest, Luke, taking away netball and just saying just across from everything in general in New Zealand.
Absolutely, Ben, and it can apply to anything. We don't get political on this show, but just to demonstrate my point, the number of people that will complain about housing prices in somewhere like Auckland, but don't actually get out of Auckland when they can, and go to areas of the country that have lower price housing is very small in comparison to the number of people that would complain or demand action be done about Auckland housing prices. But we better leave that subject there because that is something that will probably bristle a lot of the Kiwi listeners.
Yeah, correct. And it might fire up the forum, and we wouldn't want the moderators at Netball Scoop Forum to be working a little bit too hard.
No, it's not my political outlet, the Netball Forum, put it that way.
No, mine either. Even though I hardly post, I do more than I read more than I post on there.
Well, it's been great talking with you today, Ben, in the studio and taking away some of the cobwebs, but is there anything else you'd like to add?
Yeah, one thing, just taking away from the netball, like I mentioned earlier, if anyone has a chance on anywhere in the world, jump on and check out some of the AFL women's competition because it's good. It's good quality football. They might be using a smaller ball and they might be playing 16 aside, but yeah, it's good quality football. It's athletic, and I'm sure those of you who previously didn't think that women could play football, watching that, I'm sure your opinion will definitely change. And I think credit where it's due to the AFL, my employer. And all the power brokers within football for getting this competition off the ground, even if it is being played in its first season in the condensed format.
Well, it's not a particularly accurate comparison. Just to sort of lend some support to the competition, if you look at sevens rugby and the boost it got going to the Olympics, and I must admit I was proven wrong. I thought the women's sevens in the Olympics was just going to be a bit silly. It wasn't really. The game wasn't anywhere near where the men were, and so on. But having been proven wrong on that front, I ain't saying, you know, I would be silly to make the same mistake twice, Ben. All right, then. Thank you for tuning in to our first show of 2017.
Thanks, everyone.
You've been listening to the 3 Feet Radio Show with Ben Carbonaro and Luke Herbert. Tune in next time for more special guests and netball commentary exclusively on YouTube.